Anyway, now on to the next speaker. Speaker number 2 is June Rosen. June was educated at Cheltenham Ladies College. After training at Ancoats Hospital of Physiotherapy and becoming a member of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists, she remained on the staff there. Thereafter, she worked at Manchester's Jewish Hospital. Subsequently, she worked at Cheadle Royal Hospital, where she was the Physiotherapy Services Manager. June was a non-executive director on the board of Christie Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. She also worked as a deputy clinical lead therapist at the Christie, at both the haematology transplant unit and the critical care unit. She was also a non-executive director of East Cheshire NHS Trust. In total, and this is an amazing achievement, June has worked for the NHS for 62 years. So that is really absolutely incredible. She's also had a chapter published in a book, Adopting Therapies for Cancer Care. She's been the governor of 2 schools, former vice chair of Northwest Eye Research Trust, former social welfare visitor for the MS Society in Stockport. She's also one of the founder members of the Muslim Jewish Forum and a current executive member. So over to you, June, to tell us what you like about Christianity.
Thank you, Heather. Good evening. Now, what I like about Christianity, to be able to say one likes anything, it's important to go back to the beginning and to look and learn something of the history. Jesus said in his teachings that he did not come to alter one word of the laws of Moses. He was, as were all the apostles, an Orthodox Jew. He preached in the synagogues and he taught what he knew. For example, love thy neighbour as thyself, which appears in the book of Leviticus, and the priestly blessing, which we all know, beginning, the Lord bless you and keep you, from the book of Numbers. It's important also to state the book of Psalms. This forms a central part in both Judaism and Christianity and Islam, where it's called Zabur. After Jesus' death, it was hotly debated whether Christianity would become another sect of Judaism. There was a question of whether the male should be circumcised and whether traditional dietary rules were still to be observed. St. Paul and his supporters only resolved this debate as late as the Council of Jerusalem, about 50 AD or CE, and the theology was still being developed at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD or CE, hence the Nicene Creed. Christianity was brought to Britain by St. Augustine in the late 6th century, and the Church of England came into being after the Reformation, after Henry VIII split with Rome and the Pope, and with its roots back in the early church. I'm conscious that this is a very brief history of events that have a great bearing both on our country and our civilization. You cannot fail to be inspired by the many church buildings, from the tiny church of St. Lawrence, Wick-Rissington in the Cotswolds, which celebrated its 750th anniversary last year, with a beautiful concert which included the music of Gustav Holst, his first job having been the organist there at the age of 19. Then on to the vast Victorian churches, and also smaller, more intimate ones, all with their sense of history and devotion. Cathedrals are hugely important in our national, civic and personal lives. Our own Manchester Cathedral, where I remember attending the service of dedication after the restoration when all the bomb damage from the war was being repaired, and also singing there. It is a cornerstone of religious and civic life. When you look at the cathedrals built centuries ago, one can only be amazed at how they were constructed by men who had no modern building aids and no health and safety considerations. They built to the glory of God, and we view them with wonder and humility. The one modern cathedral that I visited was, of course, Coventry, rising out of the destruction of the Blitz, its architecture being very much of the 1960s. I was taken aback at the dark zigzag walls on each side leading to the altar. But when I walked back, I was stunned by the magnificent coloured glass windows, not visible before, and I could only think of the quotation, "From darkness into light." I have never forgotten it. I would be remiss not to mention the Council of Christians and Jews, founded in 1942 by the Chief Rabbi Joseph Hertz and the wonderful Archbishop William Temple, amid the horrors of the Second World War. Their work to promote to promote understanding and to challenge prejudice is as relevant today as ever. I hope you will forgive me if I speak a little of my own life experiences. When I was a child, Christianity was mainstream in everyday life. On a Sunday, nobody would dream of putting their washing on the line or letting their children play outside. On Sunday, all the children went to Sunday school. The shops closed, and apart from the lovely sound of church bells, all was quiet and peaceful. During these years, I was being brought up in a traditional Jewish household, but these two contrasts sat very comfortably together. As my father was in public life, by the time I was 10, I had been into every type of place of worship that there was in the city, I think. Wherever we went, my father was warmly welcomed, everybody knowing of his pride in his Jewish faith. This gave me a very ecumenical view, but in no way negating my Jewish upbringing. I emphasize that this is a very personal journey and one that may seem unusual for a Jewish childhood. One of the delights of our childhood was my parents' friendship with Reverend and Mrs. Tom Shaw. Reverend Shaw was the vicar of St. Barnabas Church in Ancoats, and as was common in that time amongst the clergy, he had a very good knowledge of Hebrew. He and his wife had no children of their own, and they gave my brother and me a great deal of affection over the years, and we loved them. I longed to be St. Barnabas Rose Queen, which are obviously impossible, but when I was 11, I was allowed to crown a Rosebud Queen. At that time, every school started the day with an act of worship, a hymn followed by prayers, maybe a psalm. It may sound surprising coming from me, but I mourn the loss of those lovely school hymns, many of which could have been sung by people of any faith. Later, when I attended a very strict Church of England boarding school, each week everybody had to learn the collect by heart, together with the creed and the litany. I was not required to learn any of these, but as a prefect having to test all the juniors, I knew them all. This acquainted me with the beauty of the language of the Book of Common Prayer and the majesty of the King James Bible. Whilst at school, everybody knew I was Jewish, and I encountered nothing but interest, kindness, and respect. Judeo-Christian teachings have formed so much of a bedrock of life in this country. The courts, the judiciary, medicine, education, charity, and personal affairs. The church was responsible for setting up many schools and universities, plus societies to help the poor and the sick long before there was any state aid, as well as giving a social structure to the community. It has made this country a place where over the centuries, people of other faiths have been thankful to come, able to practice their religion, to make their home, and be proud citizens. My late father was involved in interfaith work all his life, and his obituary in the Times read, "On religion he never compromised. He remained an orthodox, pious Jew who worked in the wider community. He always summarized it in this way: all prayers go to the same address. I hope I've illustrated how I, always defined by my Jewish faith, have had such respect and affection for Christianity and the part it has played in my life. Thank you.